Hello! In today's video, I want to show you my off-grid cabin plans, which are for sale on Etsy, and I'll put a link in the description. So introduction here, I've had several years of engineering experience. I've had my state license since 2012. I've had experience with mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, forensic engineering, fire and explosion investigation, a wide variety of engineering topics. And my father also contributed to this, and he has over 50 years of experience in architectural drafting and construction and contracting. So there's quite a bit of experience going into this very simple design. Let's take a look at the cabin. I actually have lived in a similar arrangement. What I live in is a larger metal building, barn dominium, that was retrofitted partially for living quarters. And I lived off-grid for about 2 years, and then formally tied in with grid power. I'm about, I guess you could say, grid supplemented, half off-grid, half on-grid. If the power goes out, I have ways. So I definitely have experience with extreme heat and extreme cold and pipes that freeze. And so in this design, I've gone and eliminated the problems that I encountered in my first design, which I am currently living in. This cabin is very small. It's intended for 1 or 2 people. It's about 40 bucks on Etsy. I'm about to lower the price. It's also on Amazon for $109 because Jeff Bezos takes 65%. So definitely go to the link for Etsy. Cabin is 16 by 24. It's a 6 and 12 roof pitch. There's a central wood stove, and it's adaptable to where you can put on a porch. It's just a simple pier and beam design. Let's go through it a little further. So in the document that you'd purchase, it's a 66-page document, so it's a little bit more than just a basic plan set. If you have a contractor, he's gonna not need to see all this, but if you and your buddies and your friend that's a carpenter and your friend that's a plumber are gonna try this, then this is the document you want. It's really intended for people that have some construction experience. It's not intended for people that have zero construction experience. On the other hand, if you work as a general contractor, you're gonna laugh at the extreme amount of detail because you think you've got it figured out, you don't need this. But in this document, I go through all kinds of things that you will need to know, including a site evaluation checklist, which tells you, before you even buy the land, is this a good idea? Is this a livable place? Is it a dangerous place? I've got a materials cut sheet with all the materials and cost estimations. Of course, your cost can vary. You could bring the prices down from this, if you do some research. You're looking at a base cost for the building of about $12,000, and the finish out is probably about another 10, and then the solar and utilities and all the septic things that you'll need is probably another $10,000. So your cost estimate is going to range between $12,000 and $30,000, and that's something you'd have to plan for. It's a small building. It's only 350 square feet approximately on the inside, usable square footage, that is to say. And that's a good thing though, because you want to make it simple where you just have a window air conditioning unit. You can just remove the window unit, if it goes bad, and you've got solar batteries and everything designed to where a small space is practical. There are other plans online which cost less, but it's much smaller buildings. So if your budget is, say your budget's $5,000 and you have, grandpa's land available, you can get a smaller building. But I personally would not want to live in a structure that's smaller than this. This is kind of the absolute minimum. And we will be creating larger plans if people are interested, but this is just sort of an opener for your bare bones, small off-grid cabin. This is the pier hole diagram, and it shows you basically your pier locations, and the diameter of the pier varies depending on the soil quality, and there's a little chart there for that. The next plan layout here is for the girders, and you want pressure treated timber. The layout that gives you 3D visual. I used both 2D and 3D CAD program to draft these. It gives you a lot of details on how the connections go. It's sort of shows you from the ground up how it's going to look and how it's going to tie together. Let's see, as we go from the ground up to, there's your insulation. It's got R19 insulation specified all the way around with a moisture barrier. A lot of people are thinking, oh man, I could just go to Home Depot and get one of those $10,000 pre-made buildings. Well, you can, but for one thing, they're not going to be rated for necessarily snow loads. I did calculations to estimate some of the capacity for snow for this building and wind, and it's within normal residential standards. And you have concrete with anchor bolts fastening it to this soil so that it's not going to blow away in a windstorm as easily. If you get hit by an F5 tornado, there's nothing I can do for you, but it's a little stouter than the average shed. Designed with modular components, right? So everything is designed based on standard store-bought materials. 4x8 sheets of plywood, 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s. And of course the 2x4 is not really 2x4, right? It's 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. And so all of that data is reflected in these drawings. So it should fit together like a glove. And I show the overview for the roof framing. As you can see here, it's got these ceiling beams which tie the wall structure together. And really quickly, here's the purpose in that. If you're looking at when you have a roof on something, it's going to try, when it gets a snow load on it, it's going to try to spread. But if you have, see the string functioning as a tension member, that's exactly what those ceiling beams will do to hold the roof in a more sturdy way. That way, you can have an open ceiling and it'll also be strong. You can put decorative timber in there as well, and you can put uplighting off of these ceiling beams, which is really cool. LED uplighting works really well. I've had that in place in my cabin for like 7 years. And so we just have a lot of pictures to show, like, okay, here's your dimensions, where your doors and windows go, details on how things fit together, expanded view on the corners so you can see how these fit together when you put each wall section up, one wall section at a time. Scrolling through your details. Pretty good stuff. The bathroom is a full-size bathroom, and the kitchen is a small galley kitchen. We also have a framed out loft with double timbers across for extra strength so that you can put a water tank in the loft area, so you can have gravity fed water to your whatever you're working on. If you want a wood stove water heater, you can do that. Wood stove is kind of mandatory in off-grid living, so it's put in the plans as well. But the loft area is not really intended for anything other than storage. You could put the water tanks up there, 100 gallons or so that you can, if you have whatever system you have, you might not have a well with a pump. You might have to bring in water and load it, into this storage area and have it drain, gravity feed to your sink and your shower. So there's the picture with the roof on, and roof framing details. There's your rafter cut sheet. Shows you all the framing details and dimensions, and your sheathing details. Shows you how you put your roof sheathing on. Now we get into the layout. This is your basic layout. You've got, assumes you're going to have a bed down here. You're going to have your wood stove in approximately the center of the room, a window unit over here, a full-size bathroom, galley kitchen. And one thing I'd like to point out about this floor plan, most of the other floor plans are not going to have, they're going to put plumbing supply fixtures on an outside wall. So you end up with plumbing supply piping on an outside wall, which inevitably freezes. My design does not have that, and I did not intend for that to be the case. You want your supply plumbing on inside walls, and that's why this floor layout is the way it is. You can have a vent stack on an outside wall, and of course somewhere the plumbing has to come out of the building and be insulated from the cold. But for the most part, you want to avoid plumbing on exterior walls, which these plans are designed for. Here's your 3D of the wood stove location. One of the reasons I went with an open ceiling design is so that not only does it look more spacious, allow for a loft, but it also allows one single roof penetration for your wood stove, which saves you money because you must have the proper fire rated gear to do a roof penetration with a wood stove pipe. They make kits for it, follow the NFPA. When you're off grid, people cut corners with code. Some codes you can get away with that on account of it's for convenience or corporate profit, but many of the codes are for life and safety, and it's a good idea to understand them and follow them as needed. And here we have a electrical layout for DC current. Shows your LED lighting, your battery bank. I give specs on, approximate specs on what kind of solar and battery bank you're going to need. There's a little 3D sketch of where your batteries might go. You're going to want 4 to 6 200 amp hour 12 volt batteries, and that's not cheap, but I would definitely go with lithium. If you go with lead acid, you have to have a battery box and vent it to the outside, and lead acid just isn't the way to go if you can avoid it. You want to get the lithium batteries, and if you're in a hot location, I would go with 6 of them. 4 is kind of a minimum. 6 is better because you're trying to run your AC overnight, and you need extra capacity to charge them up and run overnight and keep your mini fridge going and your exhaust fan. There's your AC electrical layout. Here's a mechanical and plumbing layout. I've got 2 propane inlets here. I've decided to put 2 small propane tanks in exterior boxes, and you want there's electric outlets corresponding to those boxes on the outside so that you can have a little bit of electric heat to keep the tanks from freezing up, which happens to me occasionally. So that's another thing I learned. You're supposed to have your tanks outside in a box. These are not the big tanks. The big boy tanks are not supposed to be this close to the building, but with these little portable tanks, you can get away with that. It's not recommended. It's not code to have them inside the building. The little BD cans, the little green 5-pound little Coleman cans, you can bring those inside, but you're not really supposed to bring the full-size barbecue bottle inside. You want it outside the building, which is how I've drawn it. And you can bring your water piping in this sort of arrangement to avoid outside walls. Here we have a sewer plan layout. It's designed in, you kind of have to dig through the details to figure out what you want to do. It depends on your site. You may need an exhaust fan, you may not. If you have a composter, the composter has to have an exhaust fan in it. This happened to me last night because I have a composter. The power goes out, and then you have to switch it over to my battery bank to make sure the fan keeps running, otherwise it smells like an outhouse. But as long as that fan is running, the composter toilets are pretty easy to work with. They're a pretty good deal if you can't afford putting in a septic tank right away. If you do have access to a septic tank, this piping arrangement, if you read the fine print, you can figure out how to do the proper ventilation and P-traps to run it to a sanitary septic line. So we have there's your 3D isometric little layout on how the sanitary piping should go for your toilet. I would say go ahead and put the piping in as if you were going to do a conventional toilet, and then that way you have it buried and set in the ground. At least you'll have it set in the ground, and you can do a composter for a while and share the vent pipe as long as you can pump air into the vent pipe with a fan or draw air through the vent pipe with a fan and plug off the 3-inch soil pipe for the toilet. You can rig it to where you put a composter in. As long as you do the piping correctly, you can switch over to septic later, which is kind of what I was designing this for. As for fasteners, I would recommend a Deckmate or similar brand T25 epoxy coated screws. Reasons for that: the epoxy coating won't interact with the chemicals in treated timber, so it won't corrode the fasteners. Also, the T25 is the best grabbing, and also if you make a mistake, you can unscrew it and refasten it. I use a Makita brand hammer type drill. They have a sort of a ratcheting effect, and if I can do this without screwing my foot to the floor, they're quite easy to put in. See that? Done. Pop the other one. And that structural connection is not going anywhere. And you can undo it. Plus, it's going to be way stronger on the roof rafter connections than nails. So when it comes to safety, there's two major concerns I have for you if you're planning on doing this. First of all, don't be by yourself if you can avoid it. Your biggest risk is yourself. If you have a construction accident, or even in your off-grid lifestyle, chopping firewood, cutting firewood, getting up on ladders, dragging stuff around. These are all injury prone, farm type, rural accident type prone things. And I've had my shoulder, I dropped a beam on my shoulder and screwed it up for a while. I've cut my hand open. I mean, you have to be really careful with safety when it comes to accidents, especially if there's no way for you to talk to anybody and you're stranded somewhere. So be very aware of that. Also be very aware of nature. And I'm not talking about necessarily grizzly bears and mountain lions and rattlesnakes. I mean, that's the concern too. But the most common thing we run into in Texas is going to be just crazy, crazy weather. I mean, if you're in a place like Montana, you could die. You could get snowed in without enough gear and be in serious trouble. So you have to understand your environment. You know, I would probably lean more towards like states like Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee. Those areas I think are going to be pretty good off-grid. Missouri. Rocky Mountains are cool too. It's a longer winter you have to prepare for, but Rocky Mountains are fine. You know, and then more mountain lions and stuff like that, so you have to be careful. But there's some places you just don't want to try to do this. I mean, like North Dakota, like nah. And when it comes to solar, I'm a big fan of solar, but that doesn't mean you should only do solar. Like people have political things where they're like, solar's bad, solar's great. Okay, it's just one way to make power. You're gonna need multiple ways to make power. You're gonna want solar, you're gonna want gasoline generator, you're gonna want propane, you're gonna need firewood. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to energy. So yeah, diversify your energy. You can do wind if you're in an area where that's reasonable. So, but I mean, on average, solar is a pretty cool way to get a lot of your power needs, but it won't do everything. For example, if you're in a snowy climate, you want ground mounted solar so that you can get the snow off of it. If you're in Arkansas or Texas, you could put it on the roof. And it's things like that where solar has pros and cons depending on your location. So anyways, be safe, buy my plans, have a good day.